This is going to be a training mode LUA guide for dealing with Jumpins. It's going to cover dealing with varied jump-in timings and using parry, parry block, option select, anti-airs, air-to-airs, jump parries, and movement to avoid and deal with all of these situations. We're going to talk about the different types of jump-ins. So now we have an early jump normal. Early jump normals are mostly used as ways of getting in. They are meant to blow up parries that are meant to stop mid-timing jump-ins that will allow the opponent to combo. So as an example, Alex can do jump fierce into super here, or Ken could do jumping heavy kick early into super or DP. Dudley could do jumping roundhouse into super. These are three very common situations that occur. Now, other characters do have access to tools, but it's mostly used for getting in for pressure, tick throws, whatever it may be, or just as a way to get a little bit of damage for parry-happy opponents. Now, because of this, it is a lot easier to punish than other things, but we'll go over that in a little bit. The next thing is safe jump timing, where essentially, if you try to throw, they will be able to tech. Pretty simple, right? If you try to punish, for the most part, they are going to be able to block it. And this is something that is used to allow the opponent to still combo, but stop you from dealing with the choice. It makes it a safe jump more traditionally like other game safe jumps, where you have to commit to a throw, or you have to commit to a movement choice after the fact. And then we have empty jump throw. Now, the only ways to really deal with this is to throw yourself, or to jump, or to walk back out of range. But we'll go over movement a bit. So there's three major timings that you can parry, right? Early, mid, and late. So early jump normals can be punished with relative ease. And depending on your character, you may get more or less damage, and that'll be up to you to figure out what your maximum damage is. I'll give a couple examples, and I'll explain the frame data behind them. So this is a low-hitting 5-frame normal that combos into something. So another example of this would be Dudley's stand roundhouse being able to combo into uppercut. You can actually wait for the opponent a second before you press a button, and they will fall into your normal. So as Yun, I can do crouching medium kick into dash punch. So Ken would do crouching medium kick DP, crouching medium kick DP, DP against specific characters, etc., etc. Yang can do crouching medium kick slashes, whatever he wants to do. Some characters, however, if they want to get anything off of it, need to delay and then do a fast normal. So like Yun doing standing light kick as after Alex lands. You can also wait for them to land if you are very good at timing things and maximize your punish as well. So Yun can get crouching medium punch into stand light kick dash punch. However, waiting is kind of a risk, so oftentimes you'll just see people do resets. Heavy reset pushes them the furthest away, mostly towards a round start spacing. A medium attack puts them a little bit closer, and a light attack puts them as close as possible. Some of these moves may or may not cause TDK, and that is up to you to figure out for your own characters. Now, as far as timing goes, frame-wise, this is an 8-frame normal. This is a 5-frame normal. This is a 4-frame standing normal as a delay. This is a slightly delayed 7-frame crouching normal. You get the idea. You have a lot of time. However, 14-frame normals, no dice. I'm not sure what the actual cutoff is. I think it might be around 10 or 11 frames, but for sure some characters will not be able to do some of their moves because they are slow. So let's look at the middle timing for jump-ins. So, dash punch is 8 frames, doesn't work. Close standing medium kick, also 8 frames, does not work. You have to do things instantaneously, even if they're basically active for a little while and they are low, like Ken crouching medium kick, Yun or Yang crouching medium kick, etc. You can also let your opponent land to get a maximum punish depending on your character. You can still reset them. However, they may or may not be reset by your heavies. It varies depending on the character. So, the height at which you actually parry their jump-in matters quite a bit as far as what your punishes can be. And it requires instant reactions, because if you delay too much, they're just going to be able to, block, right? And as we see here, he doesn't get pushed back as much as before. So if we were to do stand light kick as Yun and we don't delay, he will actually get reset. So if you want to punish a standing light kick, it becomes very risky. Because you may reset them, or you may, get them to land and actually be able to combo. So it's important for you to realize what is your best damage in these situations, and understand that it has to be a 7 frame or better normal in most cases to deal with the situation. Alright, so late jump in, hard to deal with, right? My 5 frame normal no longer works. So that means my 8 frame normal is definitely not going to work. What about my 4 frame normal? Oh, it didn't work. Well, if I press it instantaneously, it does work. So it needs to be a 4 frame normal that you can instantly cancel into a special or a super or whatever, or better. If you don't have that, then you won't be able to punish. The only choices that you have if you don't have a good normal is throw. And it's not really a punish because they land and they can tech. It's the same thing off of both of the other types of jump-ins as well. So the only real choice that you have here is to jump forward or backward, or throw, and if you get it, great. And if you don't get it, and they tech, you go back to neutral. So it's a almost lose-lose situation if you're not able to identify the situation fast enough. Twins can do parry into command throw, but it's very uncommon because reacting to how late you get this parry is very hard. You can also parry and do 1, 2, 3, as Yun as an example, because it is a 4 frame startup normal. But a lot of the casts don't actually have fast enough normals that can be used in this manner. So it ends up working out to the characters that can do something are usually higher tier characters. As an example, Alex, he can't really get a whole lot. All of his normals are, for the most part, 5 frames or higher. So if he parries something this low, his only option really is to attempt to move or to jump. So the frame data of your normals matters pretty much more than anything else as far as getting your punishes. And also the hurt boxes of these normals as well, because your opponent has to be able to land into it immediately. So if it's only active for a single frame or whatever, then it's not going to work. So you obviously can't parry empty jump throw, right? The only thing you can do is option parry and then throw. So if you commit to the throw, then sure, you might go back to neutral or whatever, or you may get your throw itself. But it's not really a great risk to go for in some cases, and there are other ways that you can deal with the situation, which I'll cover later. So there's 3 different types of jump parries. Forward jump, neutral jump, back jump. Now, this can be done at, multiple timings. where you either delay when you jump or you jump early. So it depends on how you can react to their jump. And in some cases, jump parries as a reaction to a jump doesn't really make sense at all. It's mostly used as a preventative measure, but you can use them as a way to deal with jumps, especially if your opponent is jumping far away. Where you can neutral jump parry, and if they empty jump, you can come down with, or if, they empty jump, you can come down with buttons, or, empty jump yourself and then throw, whatever the situation may call for. But one of the things to know about this is that you actually have to wait for your parry to finish before you can press a button to punish. So it's heavily height dependent and heavily dependent on the normal that you're using and how long said normal is and what the actual hitbox is. So like jump medium punch, as an example, may hit in some situations, but it may not hit in others. Because his hurt box during this animation is actually not as big as one might hope. So jump heavy kick may work. It is usually the things with more horizontal space that can work in more situations. Twins can dive kick and reset. So as long as you react with instant dive kick or whatever, then it's cool. But it has to be at a point where you can actually get the dive kick, right? Because you still have to get high enough in your jump before you can dive kick. You get the point. But jump parries in general have so much variety as to how they can be used. You can apply them as, part of your neutral jump game when your opponent's jumping, or as a reaction to them jumping forward and trying to, jump forward and then parry and then press a button. And depending on the situation, it may or may not be easy to do. And it may or may not allow you to do things when your opponent lands right next to you or, further away. And depending on where your opponent is in relation to you, depends on how far away they get pushed away. As you can see, depending on if I jumped forward or did neutral jump and did heavy kick, the distance at which my opponent gets pushed away after the reset changes significantly. He's a lot further away to the point where it's like round start spacing, or a little bit further away. Whereas opposed to the previous time when I knocked him down, we were about like here. So you're going to have a lot of different ways that this can be used, but it's going to vary specifically based on the character that you're playing, how useful it can actually be. Especially depending on how the normals will interact with the hurt boxes of the opponent when they're doing these things. And all of this stuff was done off of the early jump example. So let's look at the mid jump example. Neutral jump parry in reaction to a mid-time jump-in, which is a timing that a lot of people use more often than not because it's what combos most consistently, is not always the best choice. And the reason for this is because you don't actually get to punish them with like anything. So you actually have to jump forward, and you're still not going to be able to get a punish. So it's very difficult to actually do anything about this unless your goal is to run away and cover your option. So this is the most common way that this is going to be used. However, for characters like Yun and Yang, they can do stuff like this. But it's not super common to be used against players that like to do this sort of type of timing. They would rather use anti-airs or just movement in general. Because movement in general will beat this timing. And if you, jump parry early and you jump forward to this, it actually goes and doesn't get hit by a lot of the types of normals. And it covers, the early jump timing and doesn't get hit by the mid jump timing. Which is probably the most important aspect of, jump parries, is you either have to, know that your opponent's jumping at you and use it as a way to cover yourself as you're coming down if you've empty jumped, or as a way to cover your escape. Neutral jump parry is not really all that strong against very late jump-ins. And the reason for this is because all of your buttons essentially whiff, depending on your character and, who you're playing against and their hurt boxes, hitboxes, etc. There's a lot of variation. However, if you jump forward, it has to be super late, and you barely get over your opponent. So, unless you're Yun or something and can do a dive kick, it can be relatively risky. Because you land right next to your opponent, and they're landing before you. Right? So, they're technically at advantage even if you've made yourself safe. So, jump back parry is the only real way to make this work. Unless you're already neutral jumping, and then parrying at a situation where you think that you're going to get hit. Which is, perfectly useful way to do this. Because you can come down and, get a combo in some situations or whatever. Or at least you're at advantage, or at least not at pure disadvantage after your opponent lands, because they're most likely not going to be able to hit you again. But when you do parry, you're mostly going to be on the upward rising side of things. So unless you're jumping backwards, it's not really all that good. And if you are jumping backwards, the timing at which you have to parry varies quite a bit depending on the type of jump in that they're doing. So it can be a little bit risky to do the jump back parry at anything that's not like instantaneous timing. And if you're, jumping at a time where that works, then the late jump isn't going to hit you at all to begin with. So every character has different normals and different specials that function as anti-airs, right? And it all depends on what that move is and how you want to be approaching your opponent jumping to begin with. But certain characters do have strong ways of anti-airing. But obviously, parry can be used to circumvent this. Now, I'm going to be using Yun as an example for this, but every other character in the game has their own ways of dealing with jump-ins. It's up to you to figure out exactly what they are. But I'm going to give some examples with Yun. So, early jump heavy punch. Early medium kick, like too early, allows me to get hit. Medium timed medium kick allows me to hit him, sort of towards the apex of his jump. And then, if I do it too late, he'll hit me out of the startup. I can use crouching medium punch to go under the startup of the move as well. So this is why in this matchup in particular, you'll see Yuns walk forward a lot and do crouching medium punch. Or they'll walk back and do crouching medium punch. Now he can use crouching medium kick to completely go under it altogether. But depending on how the opponent likes to approach jump-ins, that may or may not be a good thing. And then you have Dakai, which goes under the opponent and allows you to anti-air with that. And this is, heavily spacing dependent. Where it requires you to, react to the first half of their jump and then do it then. Dash punch as well. You can go under your opponent or you can hit them. And it's, very spacing specific as to, what you can do and when you have to dash punch. You also have light kick up kicks, which you have a little bit longer to do, and it may hit for both. It may hit once, or it may trade. Trading is very rare, but it does happen. And it also depends, obviously, on the type of jump-in and all that jazz. Early jump normals and, wicked early jump normals can be trip guarded. So if you walk back, you can just hit them. So it really depends on the range that you're at. So movement in anti-airs is pretty important because, you know, Yun can walk forward and be completely under him, and crouching medium punch him as well. Not every character has the walk speed to be able to do something like this, and not every character has the strongest anti-airs, but, you know, Chun-Li can do back fierce into, like, lightning legs as almost guaranteed versus most of the cast. So, you know, every character has their thing. And some characters' anti-airs are stronger than others at specific timings. So, using anti-airs in general against mid-hitting normals is relatively easy. And the reason for this is because you get extra frames. However, specific types of anti-airs don't work in situations they would have before. Like me doing crouching medium punch. It doesn't work against a mid-jump heavy punch from Alex. I just get hit. If I try to low profile with crouching medium kick, it also gets hit. But, you know, it opens up a vast variety of different things, depending on my movement as well. And my spacing. So, if your opponent is insistent on wanting to combo into their, you know, damage, then it can be very beneficial to you to move beforehand, which I'll go over in a little bit. But in general, a majority of your anti-airs are going to be available to you. You just have to figure out which ones no longer become useful. It may take a little bit in training mode, but you'll get the hang of it. So when your opponent does late jump-ins, they're hedging their risks to try to make it so that if you parry them, that they're technically safe, right? And they still want to be able to combo. However, it leaves them way more susceptible to anti-airs. The only thing it doesn't work for is the low profiling. However, crouching medium punch now works again, because it's active before their jumping heavy punch even starts. Now, because of this, you know, it's a little bit harder to use dash punch to hit them. It is an option. You can still use Dekai as well. You know, every character has all of their different things. And if your opponent really likes to do late jump-ins, then trying to anti-air can be relatively strong, but they do have more time to try and parry your anti-air attempts. The later that they're able to do their move, the more time they have to buffer their parries. In which case it may be more beneficial for you not to try an anti-air, so that's where the mind games come in. Using air-to-airs as anti-airs is relatively difficult because it requires good reaction time. However, if you're capable of something like this, it changes the metagame behind the opponent jumping altogether. Because they have to account for your jumps as well, if you're going to press something, when you're going to press something, etc. So, if your opponent wants to do early jump heavy punch, they still have to worry about air-to-airs. Now, you can do jump forward, forward parry, and then a button, and still beat his choice. And the reason why that's important is because he can change the button that he's doing, and it will be out there and hitting you in a situation where it might not normally be hitting you. So that's when your opponent changes their decisions, right? They know that you're jumping, so they want to stop you. Cool. Well, let's say that you're Yun, and you want to be doing neutral jump heavy punch to stop his decisions, right? Let's go back to this. Where neutral jump heavy punch stops his ability to, you know, to do whatever. Neutral jump heavy kick can be done a little bit later. You get the idea. So if you're doing this and you want to add the parries, it's a good idea. Because it allows stuff like this, where if your hat is going right above the life bar, it's the perfect time to do a parry, because it stops the early jumps. And you can also parry on your way down, right about before when you're going to land. So you have two timings for your parry. It's not really a huge deal, but, you know, it does encompass multiple timings at which you can parry. So you can early jump parry and then parry on the way down as well. It's especially good against your opponent if they're cornered. But if their jump-ins like normal, or let's say they're doing a mid-time jump-in, they're just going to get anti-aired really easily in most cases. They're going to get anti-aired off of the ground. They're going to get anti-aired in the air if they're not option parrying. But they can option parry themselves, which is a little bit more dangerous. And that'll be gone over later. So another thing about air-to-airs is that you can do jump back normals to hit the startup of their normals, or hit, choices of theirs. So it's another thing that they have to worry about when jumping in, as long as you can react. So it's the same thing here, where, if I'm closer and I know the opponent is trying to either jump over me or do whatever, let's say the opponent's cornered, I can, jump back target combo, or I can, jump back heavy kick, or whatever it may be. There's a lot of ways that you can use jump back buttons as air-to-airs and basically stuff out your opponent's decisions, so it's an anti-air way to use air-to-airs. When dealing with air-to-air situations, whether you're the grounded opponent or the person jumping, you have less time than if you're both grounded to parry. So creating parry situations is a little bit of a pain in the butt. Now, I'll showcase a couple that I recorded, and I'll explain how I did them. Now, this one is meant to parry sort of mid-times buttons, whether it's medium kick, medium punch, whatever, and it does medium punch because I fat-fingered it instead of the heavy punch. Oops. But we have an early jump parry, which deals with, attempts to stop their jumps. Then we have a sort of middle-timed parry, which deals with, far stand medium kick, etc., but loses to this. And then we have another one that parries this. So it parries that, it parries, late jump medium kick, late jump medium punch, close standing medium kick, etc. So having the variation in there is important, because as the mind games in the actual game persist and continue and develop and evolve, you're going to come to the point where your opponent starts to parry, and understanding that while you're practicing things, that these things can come into play is very important, so that you can mentally prepare for dealing with the situation afterward. So movement's very important, because sometimes, especially off of forward movement, it can kill your parries. So if you know that you've walked forward for too long and you've eaten your parry timing, you have to block. So another thing is that, you can jump back to avoid the air-to-air situation altogether, as long as you can react in time. Or you can neutral jump parry like I've already gone over, or you can, jump forward parry like I've already gone over. Now, what about walking? If you walk back early enough, you will get out of range of everything. It's not an issue. Certain characters have longer reaching normals, so it may leave you susceptible to those, but in this specific example against Alex, you can walk back, right? But if you do it too late, oh, well, I just got put into block immediately. And there's also situations where you can be put into proximity guard, and it leaves you susceptible to throws. The further they are away when they hit you with this stuff, the less options that they have, or the options that they have require them to be further away, which are usually higher in frame count, which means that certain characters can interrupt them, like Yun can choose to standing leg kick or something. Or it shows that you can jump away because the normals are usually not fast enough or will not reach you. Pretty simple. Changes in the corner, obviously, but it is what it is. Now, you can also dash under in some situations, and it's more efficient as characters like Chun-Li, Ken, Urien in some cases, but he's so tall that it's very hard, and Makoto. Dealing with neutral jumps in general, movement is, very important. Walking in and out of ranges where your opponent thinks they're capable of hitting you, or where you're going to try to contest their jump in general, either with an anti-air or whatever. So, you can walk under jumps, and you can punish them, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can deal with this, and against certain characters and in certain situations, walking under jumps is a lot more prominent. If I were to, make him do his thing here, where he jumps over, I can walk under and Zempo him, just as an example. So knowing when you can sort of make your opponent want to jump is just as important to understanding when and how to move. So there's lots of different options. Certain characters have different tools. Necro unlocks dive kicks similar to twins. But, dive kicking, air-to-airs usually win. Especially if they're super early, like I was talking about with the Alex jump forward heavy kick, or the, Ken jump forward heavy kick earlier, whatever. Where if you're not option parrying, then you're going to get blown up. So movement in general is relatively important when showing your opponent different spacings to either make them want to jump or as a reaction to their jump to make certain jump normals better or worse. And this is a tool that exists that a lot of people don't take advantage of against dive kicks, where it puts you in a position where you can force the Yun player or the Yang player to have a bad dive kick, which forces them to make a hard read decision, either with a rejump or with, a unfavorable button choice, or simply to throw. So there's a lot of things that you can consider when thinking about movement, but a majority of it's just going to be walking back, walking forward, jumping back, neutral jumping, and the parries involved with that. There's two ways that you can do parry guard, where you just hold tap forward and then hold back, or you start crouching, you do back forward back. Now the reason why this is important is because crouching makes it so that the early jump timing for a lot of things and the mid jump timing for a lot of things will coincide, because it will pick up the end of the active frames. So if we do the parry guard on the middle timing, it'll block. And if I'm crouching, I will parry the mid jump in. Now, if I were to do the late jump in and I do the normal parry guard, I block. It's a lot easier to block the late jump in and then parry the mid and early jump in if you start crouching. And it's a little risky to do something like this when you can anti-air, you can move, you can do whatever, but if you're caught off guard and you react to the jump at a correct time and you're already crouching, you can use parry guard as a way to at least cover 2 or 3 options. If you're in the corner and your opponent's trying to do stuff like this, you can hold back the entire time and then forward back, and it will cover an extra option essentially. It's a little bit risky to do in general, but it covers at least 2 options. Where, like I was showing, if you parry guard normally, it parries the early, it blocks the mid, it blocks the late. If you do the mid version, just, standing in neutral, it loses to the early jump in, it parries the mid jump in, and it blocks the late jump in. And if you're going to be parrying late jump-ins, then that just is a risk no matter what. You have to take a hard read, essentially. Um, but this option select, although it does cover multiple options, leaves you at a point where if you block, your opponent is still at advantage. So it's very risky against characters like Twins or Ken or any other character that can make a lot out of their offense off of up close. Hugo, Makoto, Alex, especially Dudley. Dudley with his forward medium kick or his crouching light kick, he can maintain pressure relatively easily. So blocking against those characters isn't the best choice, although it is a choice. You know, anti-airing, air-to-airing, movement, those are your go-tos as far as dealing with things, but this option select does exist. And if you're already walking backwards in the middle of this, um, it makes it so that you can parry moves that are far hitting. So if your opponent jumps and, you know, they're Ken or something, or, you know, Alex, so let's record a Jumpin heavy kick, right? So when we record this, we have to be doing a middle timed jump heavy kick. So let's do that one more time. Where if you are walking back and then you tap forward and then you block again, it will parry the early and it will, or the mid, and it will block the late. So the further the move can hit you, the better you can be from this situation. Although if you block this when the opponent does it, you know, at the max range, then there's a little bit less that they can do. So just walking back in general against some jump-ins at this range is probably ideal, but in general, being able to walk back, parry forward, and then do whatever is, you know, strong. So after talking about parry guard, this one thing came to mind, where a lot of people like to walk back and then tap forward and then walk back, or just walk back and then block, right? So if you like to walk back and then block, and you try to react a little bit too quickly or too slowly, you're going to get crouching medium kicked after a backdash from Ken or Ryu or Goki or whatever, right? So empty jump backdash or empty jump parry backdash is very strong for some of the cast. You know, it works for Makoto, it works for some of the other characters as well, especially the further you are away, where, you know, backdash can open up other options. Where you know that you're going to land just inside of range of being, you know, trip guarded. So you know, empty jump forward, you block, and then you backdash. Or you block and then you jump back or whatever. It's a relatively simple concept, and it's something that, you know, some players like to do. Another thing that people like to do is pretty simple. They'll do empty jump DP. Because if you try to throw them, the DP works. So anything that is invulnerable, empty jump super, is very useful for characters like Alex and Hugo. Characters with invulnerable supers when they start up. You know, empty jump super with some other characters works as well. It's good and it's bad depending on the character that you're using and the types of mix-ups that you do off of your jumps. Characters like Alex, though, can do stuff like Genki Bomb, where they jump forward, they whiff a button, intentionally to get you to try to punish, and then they'll super when they land. So another option that exists is for Dudley, where you can do empty jump backswing blow. Where if you try to do empty jump throw, and you don't time it 100% correctly, you're going to get backswing blowed. Going back to Ken, if you try to, you know, throw Ken, and he does empty jump light short short, you know, from a far distance, you're going to end up getting hit. So if you walk back and then try to walk forward and throw, or try to walk forward and press a button or something, the short short will probably hit you, and then he can go into super. Obviously, this applies to a lot of other characters, though, with short, like Dudley or, you know, Goki, Ryu, SA1, or even just characters that do single crouch short into whatever, like Yang into EX slashes, Makoto into Hayate, whatever. So let's look at Dudley jumping heavy punch. Now, he takes a step back, and I'm able to punish with crouching medium kick. However, if I try to instantly parry into a throw, it's not possible, even though he's very, very close to the ground, because he pulls his legs up. And he's not actually going to be grounded for an extra, like, half a second or so. So you need to delay your throw in order to properly, you know, throw him. And even then, depending on your particular throw range, it may or may not be possible to do it without walking forward a step, or using a Kara. Now, when he does it from a little bit closer, you have to delay your crouching medium kick to even hit him, because otherwise the crouching medium kick doesn't work. But a majority of the time, close standing medium kick for Yun works. So anything that can hit your opponent in the air, even if it takes a little longer to happen, will work, since he's in the air for longer when he does this move. So if we do the thing where he's a little bit further back, close standing medium actually still works, even if I make it so that he is at like the max distance. As long as I'm in range for close standing medium kick, it's going to work. But if I take a step back, crouching medium kick's probably always going to be the best choice. And although this is specifically Yun type of punishes, it just is meant to give you an idea of the type of adjustments you have to make when dealing with some of the different moves in the game. Because things do take longer to fall to the ground. And Dudley's jumping heavy punch is only one of the examples. So Elena's another one, where if you try to instantly throw after you parry, it's not going to work. However, they will fall into an immediate crouching medium kick from a lot of different characters. But most of the situations will hit them in the air, and that was actually kind of funny. I didn't expect that to happen. But there's very little wiggle room to know if you're actually going to hit them in the air or on the ground for some of the moves that you may hit them with. So it's rather inconsistent punish. Some of Q's moves also are a little bit hard to parry and then punish, especially with throws, without a carrot throw. But, you know, he still is susceptible to a lot of different things. And the later that you parry it, the closer to the ground he is, obviously, so your punishes will change.